Hi everyone, I'm Professor Hall and welcome again to English 124, writing about literature. So if you saw the walkthrough video, you saw that the class is basically broken up into 3 units. We do a couple weeks on short fiction, then we do a couple weeks on poetry, and then we do a couple weeks on drama before we have our final. So this week, week 1, starts our unit on short fiction. So we're going to be looking at short stories, Cathedral, A Rose for Emily, and The Little Match Girl. Cathedral is a story about a man who has a lot of anger in his life, and he's quite isolated and biased against people, has some prejudices, and his wife has a blind friend who comes over and he helps our narrator to form a real connection, a real human connection. A Rose for Emily, kind of similar, about a woman in the Deep South who is at one point the wealthiest person in town, and because of that, a little bit isolated. And as the years go on, she becomes more and more eccentric, and she loses her money, and therefore she's kind of isolated because of that. So I chose those 2 stories for you because I had student papers that I'd like you to look at this week to see how they argued and what interpretation they had for each story, and really to look at what they did well and what they could still kind of have worked on a little bit better. But the thing I'd like you to notice in Cathedral is the characterization, the way that the narrator changes from the beginning of the story to the end. And in Rose for Emily, what I'd like you to look at is the fact that it's written in the first person multiple point of view. So first person being like I, me, my. First person plural, that's what I meant to say, multiple first people. First person plural is we, us, and our. So it really is meant to be the voice of people in the town looking at and talking about Emily. And I think the narration is kind of interesting for that reason. The third thing that you're going to be reading this week is The Little Match Girl. And I chose that story because it's not long, it's not hard to understand, but it is really open to interpretation. Some people think that it has a happy ending, and some people think that the ending is quite sad. It's by Hans Christian Andersen, and he was really known for writing fairy tales, but this is a little bit different because it takes place in the 1800s, when there were children like the Little Match Girl who were forced to work because they were impoverished. So basically, you're going to be watching my lecture about how to write a literary argument after you read those stories. Then you're going to be looking at the student papers on Cathedral and A Rose for Emily. You're going to be discussing those student papers in your first discussion forum. And then you're going to be practicing writing a short literary argument in your journal. So again, not a hard story to understand, but one that I think is really kind of interesting to talk about. So that's basically it for this week. 3 stories to read, a couple student essays to look at and to watch the videos about, and then the one lecture about how to write an argument that really is kind of going to serve as the basis for what you're going to be doing throughout the class. That's it. I hope to get to know you in the discussion forums, and I look forward to reading your work. Thanks.